Welcome to Longevity Industries' presentation of the Destiny of Manufacturing podcast. I am Dean Phillips, and I am your host. I want to thank our sponsors, the Precision Metalforming Association and the PMA Educational Foundation, for all of their help with putting this show together. Our guest today is, of course, Jeff Aznavorian, where he comes to us from Clips and Clamps, and he is the president. Welcome, Jeff.
Thanks for having me, Dean. Appreciate it.
Well, it's great to have you. And right off the bat, we'd like to try and get right into the discussions of the destiny of manufacturing and where we're going. What do you see as your big takeaway for 5 years from now?
Yeah, absolutely. This is something that we put to thought quite often at Clips and Clamps Industries. In fact, I was having a discussion with an employee today that I consider a key member of my team, and we were talking about some of these exact same issues. Manufacturing, as I see it, in the next 5 years, and maybe a little bit beyond that, is transforming very rapidly. And one of the biggest areas that I think it's transforming in is the skill levels that we need out of our employees. The days of low-skilled or unskilled labor on the manufacturing floor are going away fast, if not already gone. Most of our employees at this point, and all of our competitive and friendly competitors in the industry, are required to have high levels of computational skills, high levels of reading and comprehension skills, problem-solving skills, self-administered motivation, different things like that as well. So this is something I refer to a lot, and others have also referred to this as the need to upskill our workforce as the rapid environment changes. We don't have just press operators anymore. They're full-blown computer operators running this equipment these days. So a lot of new skills that we need to make sure that just even the average employee has these days.
Great. Now, when you say upskill, are you referring more on the side of apprenticeships internally, or are you referring more from a standpoint of outsourcing that training or using tools like PMA's educational platform?
So actually, I would say both of those are very viable, Dean. In fact, Clips and Clamps uses both of those. We've used apprenticeship programs here at Clips and Clamps since the mid-'80s. In fact, we've developed a couple of the first ever only apprenticeship programs in a couple of different skill areas that we are in, including slide forming and CNC wire forming. We created the Department of Labor apprenticeship programs associated with those. They didn't exist prior to us putting them down on paper. But yes, I mean, not just for the skilled trades, but for every level and every corner of the organization, we're going to need partners that we're working with in order to be able to continue to grow those employees on their eventual career path. And that could be everybody from middle management doing something like the MDA, or Management Development Academy, that Precision Metalforming Association puts on, to even just attending individual seminars like on deep draw or on sensor technology or on the latest and greatest with metals in the forming industry, high strength steels and the transition to more aluminum, different things like that. We're not going to be able to do all that internally. We're definitely going to need partners in order to be able to move that information through our organization.
Right. So tell me a little bit about your background and how you got involved in metal forming.
Purely by accident. If you want to know the backstory, I'll try and make it quick for you, but I am the third generation of my company here at Clips and Clamps Industries in Plymouth, Michigan. This was a place where I never envisioned myself working when I was back in high school. I actually got a degree in psychology. My undergraduate degree is from Eastern Michigan University in psychology, and I plan on being an adolescent psychologist, doing clinical work and maybe even one-on-one type therapies and different things like that. When I was in my early 20s, I came to work at Clips and Clamps for some side money because there was this girl I wanted to buy a ring for. So she's now my wife after 19 years. But and I just ended up never leaving. So in that sense, I got all my manufacturing knowledge on the floor, in the office, behind the computer, different things like that. So my first jobs on the plant floor were sweeping up grinding dust off of the mills and the bridge ports and stuff, changing oil on the presses, taking out the garbage. Those were some of my very first jobs at Clips and Clamps in my early 20s, and moved up through many different positions in the company since that point. And like I said, since most of my learning was on the job, I needed to supplement that a little bit. So believe it or not, in my mid-40s, I went back to school and got an executive master's in business administration from the University of Michigan, and completed that just 3 years ago. So that's where I stand, and 22 and a half years later, I'm still at Clips and Clamps Industries.
That's great. That's I think a lot of people, when you get into this industry, it just it is hard to get out of once you've been in it for a little while. I don't know why that is, but I think it is a very close-knit group of people, and I think that really lends itself to it.
It is, and Dean, it's something to be passionate about as well. I mean, we're making something. This is one of the few industries in our country's economy that actually is truly adding value. So we're taking raw material and we're turning it into something. Manufacturing truly adds value, and so it's easy to get behind it. It's easy to see the multiplier impact on manufacturing and the job economy and different things like that. So it doesn't make it real hard to get up for work and come in every day. And in the smaller organizations such as ours, it's really easy to see the impact that we're having on the 60 or so families that we employ here at Clips and Clamps, and that makes it worth getting up every day and coming in as well.
Right. When you talk about upskilling your workforce, what are some of the areas that you feel are the biggest needs that are out there right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I can tell you technical type interpretation. So if that comes to print reading, CAD, CAM experience, GD&T, these are all things that I'm working on. In fact, I'm working on some general GD&T training for more of my employee base here. We did some really in-depth GD&T training about 2-3 years ago, and now it's time for some refresher again. In fact, I'm looking at putting my entire all my account managers in my sales department through general GD&T training so they can have better, more fruitful discussions with our customers as we're sitting there and quoting new work. So, I mean, we're thinking outside the manufacturing floor sometimes for this thing. For the manufacturing floor itself, I would say anything related to mechatronics is extremely important right now. The interaction between electronic controls, Internet of Things, interconnectivity, and the mechanical movements that we use for putting parts together, for manufacturing, for changing shapes, any of that stuff, even for packaging or inspection, is just absolutely critical. The more that comes off of somebody's two hands being able to do something and a actual mechanical mechanism doing something, the more we're going to need for mechatronic skills.
Yes. When you talk about the Internet of Things and that Factory 4.0 philosophy, what are some of the areas that you guys are working on to try and be ahead of the curve going forward? If you look at 5 years down the road, what are some of the things that you feel you've got to do in order to be able to meet that changing demand of technology?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a constant struggle. One of the mantras, and I'm going to talk about it from my predecessor, who I have absolutely ultimate respect for, and that's my father. One of the main things I learned from him when I started working here at Clips and Clamps is don't buy a new piece of technology and then not utilize it to its fullest. There's nothing that drove him more crazy than that, and I've definitely carried that torch moving forward in this last decade or so. I would say that being able to get the most out of the data that we are collecting now is something that we constantly struggle with and something that we're constantly working on. For instance, we have a very fruitful ERP system that we use for running most of the functional areas of the company here at Clips and Clamps. But being able to extract that data and be able to utilize it and then redeploy it so that we're increasing efficiency, so that we are truly knowing our costs and things like that is critical. So even being able to get people fluent in being able to write and work with things like SQL report writing and stuff is critical for this Industry 4.0. If we can't utilize the data that we are collecting, then what is the purpose of collecting it at all? So that's one thing. I work with my local MEP, which up here in Michigan is called the Michigan Manufacturing Technology Center. And we're working with them on some Industry 4.0 type things as well in terms of being able to, we're talking about upskilling, being able to train those people. So visually and stuff, being able to create some more high-tech visual training sources for them to be able to learn, even, for instance, sequencing and assembly operation. We can do that with projection systems and things now, so we're looking at being able to do that. So a computer actually assists the person in the assembly process so that they don't miss a step.
That's some of the newer technology that is going on now with being able to analyze parts, analyze work. Do you think that artificial intelligence is going to play a bigger part in predictive maintenance and analyzing what work you're doing so that you don't have to have an analyst sit there, go through it, and try and determine whether something's important or not? It'll just, with some minor input, it'll be able to figure out what are some of the key points and be able to actuate and work off of that new data.
Yeah, you're getting even beyond my realm of knowledge there, Dean, to be completely honest with you. But I think it's inevitable that is a role that AI is going to be able to play on the manufacturing floor in the very, very near future. I see that happening. So as a metal forming supplier up here in Michigan, we're obviously heavily involved in the automotive industry, and you can see how AI is impacting the way the systems on an automobile work now. Mm-hmm. And it's just inevitable that that's going to move, through the supply stream all the way back to a company like ours that's making, engineered fasteners for the automotive industry. I think it's just inevitable.
Yeah. It's really exciting though right now, as far as a time in manufacturing to go to see big data finally being put to use. I think if you go back to even in the early 90s, we've been collecting data. We just, as your dad said, it's not worthwhile to have this technology and not use it. But that's what we did for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone said collect. It's like, it's all right. I know if we didn't write it down, it didn't happen. That was one of our old QS 9000 auditors that used to be his mantra. If you didn't write it down, it didn't happen. Well, but then what do you do with what you wrote down? Mm-hmm. We never asked that next question. You're absolutely right.
It kills me when I go into plants and I see that they have the technology. They've already made the investment and they're not using it. That just boggles my mind to see that happen. And it's something that we always are fighting to comprehend. How do we get people to actually use the devices that we install? It doesn't even, it's something that is really frustrating. And I know when George Karamejev was still around, that was one of his big complaints, was that people will invest in the technology, they'll buy the hardware and then not use it.
Right. We have the official Karamejev lab still in use today. We're using it still for all of our sensor technology that we're putting on. And I'll believe it or not, I mean, George, I miss George tremendously. He was such a humongous influence on this industry of ours, and he was the champion for trying to get us all to wake up to that and be able to utilize the stuff that we have and be able to do that. But, to this day, he would still be fighting for it because I still go into stamping companies and still go into metal forming companies, and none of their tools are censored.
Right.
None of their tools are monitored. And granted, I guess if maybe they said, well, we're not going to do anything with it, then I guess, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe they didn't spend the money. Maybe there's a lean tooling thing that they had to think about depending on what jobs they're running and different things like that. And I can respect that. But, when I sit there and I look down the die racks at Clips and Clamps Industries, and I see the umbilical cord hookups for all of our sensor technology, I know darn well that we don't have things like die crashes and stuff anymore, period. I mean, knock on wood, Clips and Clamps has not had a major die crash in probably over a decade.
Wow.
It just doesn't happen anymore. And that's massive cost savings. I don't care how you look at it. That is massive cost savings.
Yes, absolutely. And one of the interesting things is that I've noticed is that people take that for granted when you're not having die crashes, and they think that that's just happening. And
right.
which is why they stop using the technology, is because they think, well, why is that even there? We haven't had a die crash in years. Why are we even using die protection?
Yep, exactly.
Tell me about what you see happening as far as workforce development and where things like the Educational Foundation within PMA can help our future workforce and education based around metal forming, where we can take this.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I think there's some big things happening right now. One is your, good, bad, ugly. Manufacturing is in the news now. I mean, I remember, you and I remember very well, even 10, 15 years ago, manufacturing, we were just trying to get the word manufacturing into a newspaper every once in a while. And that was one of our goals in promoting the industry and stuff, as far as our advocacy type efforts and stuff that we made. But today, manufacturing is absolutely front and center. Sometimes it's for really bad reasons. Sometimes it's for extremely good reasons. But like I said, good, bad, ugly, it's out there. And so one of the things that I see happening is obviously there is some push now on the national level for some real, true workforce training. And who's better positioned than the trade association, Precision Metal Forming Association, and the PMA Educational Foundation in our industry to be the champions of that type of workforce education. We know we're the ones involved in the industry. We know what's needed. We know the skills. We know the intricacies of the details associated with the skill sets that go in there. We have knowledge area experts in those areas. Like if you wanted somebody in the Department of Labor to create a detailed training program on metal spinning, we don't want anybody doing that without coming to our metal spinning division in the Precision Metal Forming Association. And so the PMA Educational Foundation is situated perfectly in between the trade association and the need for those skills to be able to really jump in. So whether that be association-led apprenticeship programs, they being the governing body, instead of the DOL being the governing body. I mean, I think that's something the Precision Metal Forming Association is looking at, like Educational Association is looking at very closely right now. And there's other ways too, even through skills upskilling grant programs and different things like that the PMA EF could get involved in as well.
Yeah, it's an exciting time to really leverage metal forming and the industry, which is amazing when you think back 15 years ago when it was at one of its lowest points and was really struggling. We've really changed the way we've thought about manufacturing and what it can be. And I think we're getting slowly, we're impacting people as far as them comprehending it's not what you used to think manufacturing was. Most of those plants you don't see around anymore that don't what you used to think, the dark, dirty, dingy kind of plants that's just not the case. You're not going to be around long if that's the kind of plant you have. You're not going to attract a workforce. You're not going to be able to show that you are a state-of-the-art company and look at that. What do you think about areas that we can look at to try and encourage people to get into metal forming? What are some of the things that we can do to bring in the latest and greatest talent?
Yeah, I mean, so I think the idea of STEM education and pushing that all the way down to the elementary school level is absolutely critical. STEM, let's talk about it. It's almost overused now, but science, technology, engineering, and math, and sometimes people put an A in there and they add architecture. In my opinion, my father and I have always kind of talked about this. We believe the M in STEM or STEAM should not actually apply to mathematics, because the mathematics needs to come before the rest of that stuff comes.
Right.
If you don't have the math as a basis of that, then you're not going to be able to do the science, technology, or the engineering, or the architecture. We really believe that manufacturing is the M in STEM, and so therefore science, technology, engineering, and manufacturing is really what STEM is all about. The mathematics is obviously a baseline for that, and so making sure you're pushing those opportunities and pushing the exposure to those things all the way down the elementary school level is critical. One of the things that Clifton Clamps Industries does, among other things like Manufacturing Day and different things like that, we actually send a couple of our engineers go and volunteer in the elementary schools at the local level here, and they volunteer in the Society of Automotive Engineers, the SAE World in Motion program that they do in, I believe it starts in third grade. Here in our school system, and they're making things like wind-powered gliders that slide across the floor, and so they're learning things about how a little paper sail can catch the wind, and what friction is, and what lubricity is, and different things like that. And so we actually send our engineers in there to work with those kids, and then when all possible, I have a couple of women engineers here at Clifton Clamps. I'd like to get them in there too, to make sure that everybody knows that they have the same opportunities going through that type of a career path. The other thing that I can tell you, Clifton Clamps Industries has done here locally, and one of the ways that we get exposure to these kids as well, not just Manufacturing Days, we partnered with 6 other companies, manufacturing companies in Southeast Michigan here on another project with another trade association, Society of Manufacturing Engineers, SME, and their program, which is called Prime. And their Prime program is great. It works in conjunction with what we're going to be doing, obviously, with things like PMA once they add the workforce. But the Prime program seeks to establish a pure and true manufacturing curriculum in the high school system at the local level. So this actually starts to really expose them to what are the careers in manufacturing that you can go to. This is beyond the woodshop class that you took way back in the day. This is even beyond auto body or basic mechanics. This is really getting them exposed to the CAD-CAM connection, getting them exposed to data acquisition, getting them exposed to electronic controls of different manufacturing equipment. And so you can guess who it is. It's 7 manufacturers that are helping to write the curriculum that is going to go into the public school system. So it's just beautiful.
Yeah, that's tremendous, and Prime does do an excellent job. Full disclosure, so nobody thinks that I baited you into that statement, because I am on the board of directors for SME, so and
I did not even realize that. So yes, full disclosure.
So I didn't tell you to say that.
Nope. I'm very proud of Clifton Clamps' involvement in the SME Prime program. We're launching it here. Our district up here is, I believe, the 3rd largest district in the state of Michigan. Our high schools are all on one campus. They have over 6,500 students at that school. This is a tremendous opportunity for us to bring exposure to the manufacturing curriculum. And, we've lost some of that. And part of that's due to our own fault, and we had the recession of 08, 09. Unfortunately, a lot of companies had to make some very tough decisions, and people that kind of felt that they had positions and careers for life, found themselves at home and out of a job. And that was a very, very tough time for companies and obviously the employees that were laid off in those terms. But manufacturing is here. It's back. It's very, very strong. The positions aren't even the same as they were back in 2008. So we need to make sure we get these kids, even starting in third grade, get them ready for what these positions are going to require by the time they get there.
Yeah. And I think the more we can get kids exposed to technology and understanding what it can do, they can see the application. And with things like how it's made, programs like that, you find that they can get excited. Kids get excited when you go and see like a robotics competition. You yourself get very excited about what the future holds when you see these kids and what they can do and how passionate they are for the technology.
Yep.
I encourage anybody who has an opportunity to get involved with one of the robotics competitions to do it, because it's exciting to see that, and you will be so motivated after you come back from that. I really think that's an area that everybody should find something that they can get involved in, because every manufacturer benefits from that.
And get your kids involved early. You don't have to wait till they hit high school to get them in robotics programs. There are first robotics programs for the middle schools and junior high schools, and there are Lego leagues and everything at the elementary school level. You don't even have to do it with a school. I know most Lego leagues and a lot of first teams are even 4-H groups. So even if you're in a rural area and stuff, there's nothing that prevents you from getting involved in that, in that stuff now.
That's a great point. Thank you. Tell me about other technology that you're seeing that 5 years from now will really be at the forefront, either at material science, technologies, smart manufacturing. What kind of things are you excited about?
Yeah, I'm excited. Well, I can tell you, sometimes it's maybe not as exotic as you might think, but the one thing I see taking over our industry completely right now is computer-controlled servo motors. And I don't care if you're talking about a large servo press or you're talking about servo actuation on different things. Like I said, one of our main apprenticeship programs here is slide forming, and servo is absolutely taking the slide forming industry by storm right now. What we're going to be capable of doing on a slide forming equipment, whether it's vertical, whether it's horizontal, in the near future is going to be incredible compared to what we were even able to do a decade ago. So servo controls and computer-aided manufacturing controls associated with those, I think, are going to be extremely huge. And then integrating some of those things together. So, I mean, people have been doing things, let's say, for instance, with in-die welding, in-die staking, different things like that for decades and decades now. But with the way that we can monitor and change things on the fly, I think that's going to become even more viable. And it's going to be something that we need to do as far as the manufacturing economy in the United States. We're going to need to do in order to compete on a global level. So, I mean, these are some of the things that we're really excited to see happen in the next 5 years or so here.
Excellent. Well, I hate to say this, Jeff, but we are just about out of time, and I really do appreciate you being here today. It's been a pleasure, and I know that everybody appreciates your input and your ideas for the future. Everybody, thank you for being here, and thank you for the Precision Metalforming Association again for helping us put this show together. Everybody go make it a great day.
It's been an absolute joy. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.